The town parade was supposed to be a celebration, but to me it felt more like a mirror reflecting everything I had always tried to ignore about myself. Main Street was alive that afternoon. Red, white, and blue banners hung from every lamppost, fluttering with each breeze. Children ran along the sidewalks with dripping popsicles, their laughter colliding with the brassy notes of the high school marching band. The air smelled of popcorn and cotton candy, and people leaned out of their folding chairs to wave at every float that rolled by. And then there was me. I sat alone on the curb, my knees pulled up slightly, my hands clasped in my lap. I could feel the hard concrete beneath me, grounding me in a way I both appreciated and resented. I wasn't far from my family. They had set up their lawn chairs just a few feet down the street, but the distance felt wider than miles. I could hear them. The bursts of laughter, the little digs that weren't exactly whispered. "Look at her, always by herself," one of them snickered. Another voice followed. "She couldn't even sit with us if she tried." I didn't have to look to know they were grinning at each other, proud of the joke, proud of their unity against me. It wasn't the first time. It probably wouldn't be the last. My family had always had a way of making me feel like a guest in my own life. Too quiet, too strange, too different. I used to tell myself their laughter didn't matter, but sitting there, surrounded by music and celebration, I felt smaller than I ever had. Like every eye on the street could see what they saw, someone who didn't belong. I focused on the parade instead. The marching band was approaching, their uniforms crisp under the September sun. The drumline thundered, shaking the ground beneath me, and for a moment I let it drown out the sound of my family's voices. Behind them came the floats, brightly decorated trucks with cheerleaders tossing candy, veterans waving stiffly but proudly, the local bakery handing out samples in plastic-wrapped bags. Everyone around me cheered, waved, clapped. I tried to smile, to blend in, but it felt like pretending. When I glanced sideways, I caught my mother looking at me with that half-pitying, half-amused expression I knew too well. She nudged my brother, who smirked and whispered something that sent them both into another fit of laughter. My throat tightened. I wanted to stand up, to leave, to walk away from all of it. But I stayed rooted to the curb. Walking away would have only confirmed what they already thought of me, that I was weak, awkward, incapable of facing them. So I sat there, staring at the bright colors and waving flags, pretending I couldn't hear them, pretending their laughter didn't scrape against my skin. And then I noticed the next float coming into view. It was bigger than the rest, decorated with streamers and a giant banner that read, "Honoring Our Town's Heroes." The mayor himself was seated, at the top, smiling broadly, waving at the crowd like he belonged to everyone. His car was polished so bright it reflected the sunlight into my eyes. I lowered my gaze quickly, not wanting to be caught staring. But something about the way the float was slowing down made me uneasy. The music faltered for a beat. The cheerleaders on the previous float stopped their routines, and suddenly the entire parade seemed to hesitate, as if the rhythm of the day had stumbled. I frowned, glancing around. People were murmuring, shifting in their seats. The mayor had risen from his chair, holding a microphone. His eyes scanned the crowd, and for one terrifying, bewildering second, I thought, he's looking right at me. When the mayor's gaze seemed to land on me, I froze. Surely I was imagining it. Why would he single me out? I dropped my eyes to the pavement, tracing the little cracks in the curb with my sneaker. Anything to avoid the possibility that he had actually noticed me. But of course, my family noticed. They always noticed the wrong things. "Look at her," my cousin's voice carried, sharp and amused. "She looks like a deer caught in headlights." My brother snorted. "What else is new? She's been like that her whole life." The laughter came again, rolling over me like an old, familiar tide. I hated how well I knew the rhythm of it, the way they built their jokes off each other, trading smirks like currency. It wasn't just today. It never was. The sound pulled me backward in time, to birthday parties where my gifts were met with polite thank yous, while theirs were paraded and praised, to dinners where my quietness was dissected like a flaw, jokes tossed across the table at my expense. Speak up. We can't hear you. Cat got your tongue? Even my small victories, an award from school, a scholarship, a volunteer certificate, were quickly brushed aside. That's nice, they would say before launching into stories of someone else's bigger, louder achievements. Silence had always been my refuge, but to them, it was a weakness, a blank space they could fill with their laughter. I remembered once, in high school, being forced to join them at a carnival. They walked ahead in a tight group, leaving me trailing behind. When I finally caught up, winded and embarrassed, my sister had turned around and laughed. "Oh, look, the ghost decided to show up." Everyone joined in. I smiled weakly, but inside, it felt like my chest had been carved hollow. That same hollowness stirred now, sitting on the curb. I wondered if the people around us could hear them, if the strangers clapping and cheering for floats could sense the private cruelty happening in public. Probably not. Families have a way of disguising their sharpness as harmless fun, little digs that outsiders mistake for affection. But I knew the difference. I felt it in every cell of my body. I kept my eyes forward, forcing myself to focus on the parade again. The fire trucks had rolled past. Earlier, sirens blaring in celebration. Now came a group of veterans, medals glinting on their chests. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, honoring the bravery that deserved every ounce of recognition. I clapped too, though quietly, my palms stinging from the force I put into it. Maybe I was clapping for more than just them. Maybe I was clapping for every quiet act that goes unnoticed, every person who sits alone on a curb while the world laughs without understanding. Still, my family's voices cut through. They were louder to me than any siren, sharper than the drums. My mother's chuckle, my uncle's teasing tone, my sister's exaggerated whisper. It all swirled together, a chorus I couldn't escape. It struck me then how exhausting it was to carry their voices everywhere I went. Even when I was alone, I could hear them. Even in my accomplishments, I felt their dismissal. They had written a story about me years ago, the quiet one, the odd one, the nothing special, and they told it so often, I had started to believe it myself. But something in the air felt different that day. Maybe it was the weight of the mayor's glance, the sudden falter of the parade's rhythm, the hush that spread across the street. For the first time, I had the unsettling sense that the story they had written about me might not be the only one people were willing to see. The music ahead stumbled, cutting off mid-note. Murmurs rose through the crowd, and then, impossibly, the mayor lifted the microphone to his lips. The mayor's voice echoed over the loudspeakers, deep and steady, cutting clean through the chatter of the crowd. "Hold the procession." At first I thought I'd misheard, but then the music stopped altogether. The drums halted mid-beat, the brass players lowered their instruments, and even the children tossing candy froze in confusion. A hush rolled down Main Street like a wave, pulling everything quiet in its wake. I blinked, glancing around at the puzzled faces. A man near me pulled off his baseball cap, squinting toward the mayor's float. "What's going on?" he muttered. I had the same question. The mayor was standing now, one hand gripping the microphone, the other shielding his eyes against the sunlight as he scanned the crowd. His face wasn't smiling anymore. It was intent, focused, like he was looking for something or someone. And then his gaze landed on me. I froze. My first instinct was to look behind me, convinced there must be someone else, but there was no one. Just me, perched on the curb, shrinking under the weight of dozens of curious stares. The microphone crackled. "There," he said, his finger extending toward me, sure and steady. "Right there." Gasps fluttered through the crowd like startled birds. My heart lurched into my throat. He couldn't mean me. He couldn't. Beside me, my family's laughter stuttered, faltered into uneasy silence. My brother shifted in his chair, muttering, "What the hell?" My mother leaned forward, eyes narrowing as if trying to confirm she hadn't misunderstood. The mayor stepped closer to the edge of the float, his voice firm, carrying across the street. "This medal," he said, holding up a small, shining object for everyone to see, "belongs to the quietest hero we have." The word struck me like a bell ringing inside my chest. Quietest hero. I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind scrambled for explanations. Surely this was some mistake. Someone had set this up as a prank, or maybe he was speaking metaphorically, addressing the crowd as a whole. But his finger remained fixed on me, his gaze steady and unshakable. All around, people turned to look. Neighbors I recognized from the grocery store, the mail carrier who waved every morning, parents from my old school. Eyes wide, eyebrows lifted, murmurs rising. I could feel their curiosity pressing in, wrapping around me like a net. Heat rose to my cheeks. My pulse hammered so hard I thought I might faint. My family, stunned into silence, had no jokes ready this time. For once they had nothing to say. I wanted to stand and protest, to tell the mayor he had the wrong person, that I was nobody, that he must have mistaken me for someone else. But my legs wouldn't obey. Instead, I sat there, my hands trembling in my lap, staring at the man on the float as if he were speaking another language. Quietest hero. The words rolled over and over in my head, clashing with every insult, every laugh, every whispered dismissal my family had ever thrown my way. Hero? Me? I wasn't a hero. I was just invisible, forgotten, the butt of their jokes. And yet, here I was, in the middle of Main Street. The parade stopped, the mayor pointing at me with certainty in his eyes. Something in the air shifted. I felt it in the way the crowd leaned in, the way even the children hushed, candy forgotten in their hands. My world, so small and ridiculed moments before, had cracked open. The mayor raised the medal higher, its surface catching the sunlight until it gleamed like fire. And then, to my shock, he began to step down from the float, heading straight toward me. The crowd parted as the mayor descended from the float, each step deliberate, his polished shoes clicking against the metal ladder until he reached the street. A hush had fallen over Main Street so complete that even the flags above seemed to hang still, caught in the strange gravity of the moment. I wanted to disappear. My body screamed for me to melt into the pavement, to vanish before he reached me. But it was as if my legs had been nailed to the curb. I couldn't move. He crossed the street with calm authority, the medal still glinting in his hand. I caught glimpses of faces in the crowd, neighbors I'd seen in passing, parents from my childhood classmates, even people I didn't know, all staring, all waiting for me. When the mayor finally stopped in front of me, he lowered his gaze, and for the first time I saw no spotlight, no performance, just recognition. "This," he said softly, though the microphone carried his words far, "is long overdue." The metal looked impossibly heavy in his hand, a round disc of silver framed with a red, white, and blue ribbon. My heart thudded so loudly I was certain everyone around me could hear it. My voice cracked, barely audible. I swallowed hard, trying again. "I don't understand." He knelt slightly, lowering himself to my level so the world around us faded. His eyes, kind and unwavering, met mine. "You don't have to understand," he said. "You just have to accept what's always been true. Always been true." The words felt like a riddle I didn't know how to solve. Memories surged, unbidden. Nights spent volunteering at the library, helping kids with reading when no one else had the patience. Quiet hours at the food pantry, organizing donations long after others had gone home, dropping off groceries at Mrs. Whitaker's porch during the winter storm, careful not to be seen, writing letters to deployed soldiers, sending encouragement into silence without expecting a reply. None of it had ever seemed like much, certainly nothing worthy of stopping a parade. They were small things, hidden things I never spoke about because, well, that wasn't me. I didn't announce. I didn't brag. I just did. But somehow, He knew. I shook my head, the weight of disbelief pressing down harder than the concrete beneath me. All my life, my family had convinced me that what I did, who I was, amounted to nothing, that my quietness equaled absence, that my silence meant insignificance. And now, here was the mayor, in front of the entire town, undoing their narrative with a single gesture. He extended the medal toward me. My hands trembled as I lifted them, hesitant, almost afraid to touch it. The cool metal pressed against my palms, shockingly real, startling in its solidity. The ribbon slipped between my fingers and the crowd erupted into applause. Cheers surged down the street like a rushing river, loud enough to drown out even the echoes of my family's laughter. For the first time in years, maybe in my whole life, the noise was for me, not against me. I rose slowly, my legs unsteady. The medal clutched to my chest. The weight of it was more than physical. It was the weight of years of invisibility, the heaviness of every insult, every dismissal, every whispered, "You don't matter." And it was being rewritten, right there in the open. The mayor placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Don't ever think your quiet wasn't heard," he said. His voice was low, but I carried it like thunder. My throat tightened. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Not yet. Instead, I stood there, trembling but taller somehow, the metal pressed against me as if it were holding me together. For the first time, I felt seen. The sound of the crowd washed over me, wave after wave of applause and cheers crashing against my ears. It was disorienting at first, like I had suddenly stepped into someone else's life. People were standing now, clapping until their palms turned red, some even chanting my name as though they'd been waiting for this moment all along. My name, which had always felt like a whisper, buried under everyone else's voices, was being spoken aloud with pride, with force. It startled me so deeply that for a moment I almost didn't recognize it. I turned slightly, the metal still clutched against my chest, and caught sight of my family. For once, they weren't laughing. My mother's mouth hung open, her eyebrows furrowed in a mix of confusion and disbelief. My brother had slouched in his chair, his jaw set tight, eyes darting between me and the people applauding, as if trying to make sense of an impossible equation. My sister crossed her arms defensively, her smirk gone, her face pale. The power dynamic had flipped in an instant, and they didn't know what to do with themselves. It should have felt like victory, and in some ways, it did. To see their smirks wiped clean, their whispers silenced, their confidence crumbling, it was like breathing for the first time after being held underwater. But underneath the triumph was something else, something harder to name. Sadness, maybe, or grief. Because deep down, I had spent years wishing for their approval, their pride, their recognition. And now that the whole town was giving it to me, my family sat stone-faced, refusing to join in. Their silence cut almost as deep as their laughter. Still, the clapping didn't stop. The neighbors who once barely nodded at me in the grocery store were smiling, shouting encouragement. Mrs. Whitaker, frail but determined, was clapping so hard her hands shook, and I realized she must have been one of the voices that told the mayor about me. Others followed, people I hadn't even realized noticed. Faces from the library, from the food pantry, from those quiet intersections of my life where I thought I had gone unseen. I wasn't unseen. I had never been unseen. It hit me like a jolt of electricity. The world I thought ignored me had actually been watching all along. Not the loud voices of my family, not the ones who mocked me, but the quiet witnesses, the ones who valued small acts, steady presence, silent strength. As the cheers rolled on, I forced myself to stand taller. My legs still trembled, but I refused to shrink. I refused to hunch back into invisibility. The mayor raised my hand gently, holding it up so everyone could see. The applause swelled again, louder this time, echoing against the brick storefronts and spilling out over the town square. For the first time, I let myself smile, Not a timid, uncertain smile, but something real. It wasn't about showing off or rubbing it in anyone's face. It was about acknowledging myself, allowing myself to take up space without apology. I looked back at my family once more. They still hadn't clapped. Their silence was deafening in its own way, but now, for the first time, it didn't feel like a chain around my neck. It felt small, pitiful even, compared to the roar of the crowd. And maybe that was the greatest shift of all. Their voices, the ones that had dictated the story of my life for so long, no longer had the power they once did. They had been drowned out, not just by the crowd, but by the realization that I no longer needed them to validate me. As the applause thundered on, I pressed the medal to my chest again and whispered a truth I had never dared say aloud. I matter. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. Even after the cheers had softened, after the marching band struck up again and the parade lurched back into motion, I stayed frozen in place. The medal was still warm in my palm, its ribbon brushing against my fingers, and I couldn't stop staring at it. All my life, the word quiet had been my burden. It was the thing people used to explain me away, to diminish me, to box me in. Teachers had written it on report cards. She's a quiet student, as though it were a flaw. My relatives used it as the punchline to every joke. She's so quiet you'd forget she's in the room. Even my own family weaponized it, twisting it into an accusation, a reminder that I was always less, always other. But standing there on Main Street with the medal heavy in my hand, I realized how much power that word truly held. Quiet wasn't absence. Quiet was presence that didn't demand attention. Quiet was steady hands folding donated clothes at the church drive. Quiet was slipping groceries onto a widow's porch without needing to be thanked. Quiet was holding a neighbor's secrets in confidence, listening instead of interrupting, standing strong without shouting. Quiet was not nothing. Quiet was everything. The crowd had cheered not because I was loud, not because I had forced myself into their line of sight, but because the very thing I had been mocked for, my silence, had carried weight. It had meaning. It had left ripples where I thought there was only stillness. I thought about the veterans who had marched past earlier, their medals clinking against their uniforms. They were heroes of bravery, of sacrifice, of battle. And though I would never put myself in their category, I suddenly saw that heroism had more than one face. Sometimes it looked like a soldier in uniform, and sometimes it looked like a woman sitting quietly on a curb, carrying years of unspoken resilience. The word hero still felt foreign in my mouth, too big for me to claim. But maybe I didn't have to claim it outright. Maybe it was enough that the mayor had said it, that the town had echoed it, that the truth of it had pierced through the walls my family had built around me. I caught sight of my reflection in the bakery window across the street. My hair slightly messy from the wind, my face flushed, my posture awkward as always. But there was something new in my eyes, a steadiness, a strength I hadn't let myself acknowledge before. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't less. I wasn't broken because I was quiet. Quiet was how I endured. Quiet was how I contributed. Quiet was how I survived. And in that moment, quiet became something else too. Defiance. Defiance against the voices that told me I didn't matter. Defiance against the years of laughter and dismissal. Defiance against the story that had always been written for me. I straightened my shoulders, letting the weight of the medal anchor me rather than crush me. My family's silence still pressed at the edges of my awareness, but it no longer owned me. Their version of quiet, weakness, insignificance had been stripped away. I was reclaiming the word, reshaping it into something fierce and unshakable. Quiet didn't mean I had nothing to say. Quiet meant I was strong enough to speak only when it mattered. And for the first time in my life, it mattered now. When the last float passed and the crowd began to thin, I stayed rooted on the curb, clutching the medal like it was the only thing tethering me to the earth. The air was full of fading laughter and the distant sound of the marching band retreating down the street. But inside me, everything was strangely still. My family gathered their folding chairs, stuffing snack wrappers into a plastic bag. Normally, they'd be loud and bickering as they packed up, but today, their silence was a different kind. Uneasy, heavy. "Ready?" my mother asked finally, her tone clipped. She wouldn't look at me directly. I rose slowly, brushing the dust from my jeans. For years, I would have rushed to bridge the gap, to make them comfortable, to laugh off the awkwardness, but not this time. I held the metal tighter and said nothing. As we walked to the car, their whispers started. Not the usual mocking tone, but defensive, brittle. Must have been some mistake. Probably just for publicity. Don't let it go to your head. The words slid off me like rain against glass. They stung, yes, but not the way they used to, because this time their voices weren't the only ones in my head. Overlapping them was the roar of the crowd, the warmth of strangers' applause, the mayor's steady voice calling me a hero. For once, the balance had shifted. Later, when I was finally alone in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and placed the medal on the quilt beside me. The sunlight through the window caught on its polished surface, throwing a shimmer across the wall. I stared at it for a long time, trying to reconcile the weight of it with the years I had spent believing I was weightless. I thought about all the small things that had defined my life, the moments no one had noticed but me. The evenings shelving books at the library long after the doors closed, the Saturdays helping neighbors rake their leaves when they were too old to do it themselves, the countless hours listening when someone needed to talk, giving without asking anything in return. None of those things had ever seemed like much. They weren't loud, they weren't flashy, they didn't make for good family anecdotes at Thanksgiving dinner, but they were mine, and they mattered. For years, I'd let my family's version of me dictate the way I saw myself. They painted me as invisible, and I accepted it. They called me weak, and I believed it. They laughed, and I shrank smaller to avoid giving them a bigger target. But sitting there with the medal glinting beside me, I realized something I should have known all along. They were wrong. They had always been wrong. Quiet wasn't shameful. Quiet wasn't empty. Quiet was strength. Quiet was survival. Quiet was mine. My family might never understand that. They might never clap for me, never look at me with pride, never rewrite the story they'd told about me since childhood. But maybe they didn't need to. Maybe the only rewrite that mattered was the one I gave myself. I picked up the medal again, holding it in both hands. It wasn't just a symbol of recognition. It was a promise. A reminder to never again apologize for who I was. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't carrying my silence alone. The whole town had seen it, acknowledged it, even celebrated it. That was enough, more than enough. That night, after the noise of the parade had faded into memory, I stood in my bedroom with the medal in my hands. I turned it over slowly, feeling the grooves of its design, the way the medal caught the lamplight. I had never held anything that felt both so heavy and so liberating at the same time. I thought about where to put it. Part of me wanted to tuck it away in a drawer, out of sight, like I had always done with the few small recognitions I'd received in the past. Hide it before anyone could dismiss it. Hide it before it could be laughed at. But no, not this time. This medal didn't belong in the dark. I walked over to my bookshelf, the same shelf where my favorite novels leaned against one another, where a few framed photos sat collecting dust. I cleared a space right in the center and placed the medal there, front and visible. A quiet defiance, a declaration. As I stepped back, something inside me shifted. For years, I had measured myself by the wrong scale, by the absence of my family's approval, by the hollow echo of their laughter. I had let their voices drown out my own, but the mayor's words, the roar of the crowd, the weight of the medal, they had cracked that narrative wide open. I didn't need their recognition anymore. I didn't need their applause. I had already been living in a way that mattered, even when no one said so. And maybe that was the point. Maybe quiet heroism isn't about waiting for someone to notice. It's about knowing deep down that your life has value whether or not it's ever announced from a parade float. For me, the announcement came. But even if it hadn't, I think I would have still reached this truth eventually. I am not invisible. I am not less. I am not a joke. I am enough. I trace the ribbon with my fingertip, steady now, no longer trembling. I thought about every person who has ever been underestimated, erased, mocked for being different, or dismissed for being quiet. I thought about how many of us carry our lives in silence, doing good without reward, enduring without praise. To anyone who knows that ache, this story is for you. If you've ever been the one sitting alone, hearing laughter that wasn't kind, if you've ever wondered whether you mattered because no one said you did, if you've ever been told you were too quiet, too small, too insignificant, know this: silence is not weakness. Quiet is not emptiness. Quiet is strength. Quiet is endurance. Quiet is its own kind of power. That day, in the middle of Main Street, I reclaimed the word that had haunted me my whole life. I took it back, and I promise you this: you can too. So let them laugh. Let them underestimate you. Let them erase your name from their stories. None of that can erase who you are or what you've already done. You matter. You always did. And it's never too late to write yourself back in.